LA. Her teaching background and areas of expertise focus on issues of social justice and equity in higher education. She serves as an advisory board member of Peace Over Violence. So anyone, you walked on, you saw these Peace Over Violence cards? That's her. She serves as an artivist. Dr. Valazadi strongly believes in power of music and art to promote social change. She's a member of Never Speak LB, a collective of Long Beach's singers and poets. She is fluent in Farsi, Spanish, and English, and has presented on sexual assault awareness and prevention in all 3 languages. Give it up for that, okay? Her social media handle is Dr. Noosh_B, if you want to keep up with her. And I'm going to hand the mic off to you, beautiful.
Thank you for that welcome. Wow. You know, I was so stressed out because I hate introducing myself, so that was really great. Thank you for that. Well, can't you tell I'm a professor? And so my name is Nooshin Valizadeh. My students call me Dr. V. Where they at? I have some right here. What's up? And thank you. A lot of my friends call me Noosh, and my boss calls me Mommy. She gave me the night off. So thank you so much for being here. This is a night of emotional healing and wellness. And I have to say that as a nerd, I have read a lot of books on activism and how people went through it, especially when I'm alone at 4 a.m. and I'm writing and dealing with a struggle. The work can be extremely lonely. So one thing that I've read about from a lot of different people in the movement is that there's a feeling, there's a spiritual energy that everybody in the movement kind of has, and you can't really explain it, but it's just there. And I really, really feel that tonight, thanks to all of your brave souls for being here as well. So I really want a round of applause for you all, please, for making it here. I know tonight this amazing panel of intersectional women, it's about healing, but there's going to be a lot of content in there that might be triggering. So I really thank you for actually making it here and reminding us of why we're in this hard work. So thank you for that. I'd like to bring up on the stage all of my amazing panelists and have them introduce themselves, please. Natalie, Mary, Amita, Banbi.
Y'all can clap for us.
Yeah, clap for everybody. Come on up. Come on up. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a panel of not only talented but courageous women to come here and share their stories with all of you, and also show you how they've been able to actually work through the traumas and work through their own healing in ways that might actually help you or somebody that you know as well. So with that, please let's first just have you all explain a little bit about how you got into this work and a little bit about your background.
We're starting with me. Okay, so my name is Amita Swadin. I got into this work because I was raped by my father, as you heard in my letter. And I think it's really important in this moment of so much media coverage on organizing and activism to end sexual violence that we remember not to professionalize what is actually our lives, right? So I got into this work because I believe in survival for myself and for everybody that I know and love. Most people I know are survivors. Professionally, I was blessed to receive a fellowship after years of community organizing and poetry and very public work and advocacy at the government level, in high schools, in communities, as a queer person of color, as a youth organizer, as a daughter of immigrants from India. I got a fellowship to create a project which I mentioned during my letter called Mirror Memoirs, and Bambi's on the board, and I'm so glad that she speaks next. It's just always nice to pass the torch to a close comrade. But that project specifically speaks to the way that queer and transgender and intersex and non-binary people of color have been largely left out of the professional sphere and the media sphere around who is a survivor and how we understand violence and who is a perpetrator even, and thinking beyond things like gender. So I've traveled the country over the past 18 months interviewing 60 people at that intersection across 15 different states, and we will be releasing the archives in the coming year. So thank you so much for having me.
Bueno, buenas tardes, primero que nada a todos y a todas. A mí, primero que nada, antes de empezar cualquier discurso, a mí me gusta darle gracias a mi poder superior por darme la oportunidad de estar aquí con ustedes. Y también quiero honrar la tierra en la cual estamos hoy aquí. So for those of you who were not able to understand, I just acknowledge my higher power. That's the brief translation. And I also honor the land where we're standing on today. I have to say that I am a very privileged trans Latina mujer emigrante. I also, before I get into, I guess, how I got into this, I also would like to acknowledge those of us who are trans and gender non-conforming. If you can just, be courageous enough to raise your hand or stand up, whatever's comfortable for you. Would you please? Can we please honor our siblings? Can we honor our siblings like we really mean it? Thank you so much. I wanted to do that because, as we know, trans and gender non-conforming individuals, we are not even acknowledged. Our existence is not acknowledged within our society, and in fact, the institutions that have been built have been designed to erase our existence. So it is important that we acknowledge our siblings. I got into this work because, because my higher power had a purpose for me when I never even understood what that was. And I guess I'm gonna say one particular incident that happened that completely changed my life was the murder of Juan Araujo. How many of you know who Juan Araujo was? Thank you. Juan Araujo was a young trans Latina 17-year-old who was brutally murdered in 2002 up north in California. Okay. What was that keep doing that? I'm like, is that part of the production or what's that? I know, like, are you, what's up? What's up with that? Anyways, somebody fix that, please. I know. What's up with the team? Anyways, she was brutally murdered, and that was something that shifted in me. I said, at the beginning, I acknowledged that I am a very privileged trans woman because I have had the opportunity to overcome many issues and challenges that many members of my community continue to experience today, such as homelessness, sexual work as a means to survive, prison, immigration detention, sexual abuse, both in the streets and in jails, and from my own family, or not necessarily my family, but a person who was supposed to be part of my family. And so, seeing that, I had the opportunity to, and I know that I need to be very brief, but being that I had the opportunity to change my life, and being that I had the opportunity to see the experience of this young trans woman, that the same issues that my experience, my own self and the people that I was around with were also experiencing, which is violence. And so I was able to get enraged and say, fuck this shit. And that's how I got involved, and that's how I have been involved for the past 20 years into changing the structures that continues to marginalize us and continues to try to erase us. I guess with that, I'm just gonna stop because I know that I've been talking a lot and I can talk a lot.
Yeah, but thank you.
So, yes.
Thank you for that story.
Sorry, I was having a moment. I'm like, just two heroes of mine I've been following for years. I'm having an out-of-body moment right now. So, good evening, family. Good evening. My name is Anna Cho Fenley. I am the state director of an incredible movement called Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. Headlines is we're a group of survivor organizers fighting for a new narrative on safety in this country and in our state, one that is rooted in investments in healing and prevention and access to trauma recovery services over more investments in prison and jails. And why that is so critical to our policy making is these bills and laws and political agendas have literally been built on the backs of stories like ours, and in the name of stories like ours. So my work is deeply personal in that way. I came into this space as an advocate. I was not ready to identify as a survivor. I see many of the people in this room who have actually helped me with that journey. I see my ARC family. Shout out from ARC. A lot of folks in this room who are actually part of the criminal justice reform movement may not identify with me as a survivor, which I think is really just important for me to unpack and bring into the room that this is not a comfortable space for me. I'm kind of the behind the scenes girl. I'm the state director. I'm not often showing up in this personal of a way. So much love to all the survivors for sharing just your truths and your gifts with us tonight. My healing journey really began when I gave myself permission to even be vulnerable. You know, I love the title of this event tonight, The Alchemy of Survival, because when I was thinking about that on the ride over, it really reminded me of the process of alchemy and the process of gold. I think that's such a beautiful visual to connect to our healing journeys. You know, when the process of making gold, it doesn't always start out looking all bright and shiny. You gotta put it in the fire, let it burn, take it out, all right, not ready, put it back in, let it burn, take it out, still not ready. And finally, this beautiful gem comes out, which I think is so reflective of the healing process, where we have that gold and that resilience in us, but we just haven't found it quite yet. My survivor story, I always say, started with my ancestors. You know, it started with their sacrifices, the wars that they went through, literally the barriers that they faced, that now pumps through my veins. We now call that generational trauma. Such an important issue to uplift, I think, tonight, because these systems and practices don't recognize our generational trauma. My living experience with survivorship started when I was a baby. I learned trauma before I could walk. I was trafficked into the international adoption system without my parents' consent or knowing what had even happened to me. I was literally taken from my home and from my stability and shipped across the world. So I learned how to fight really young. I then shared the experience of what 1 in 5 women in this country share as a child sexual abuse survivor. So after learning how to fight, I learned how to disconnect. I learned how to be silent. I learned how to hide other people's secrets. And I learned how to hold guilt for all of that. Because that's something we're really good at doing, right? We're really good at internalizing that's all of our fault. After that, there was a series of vulnerable situations that I had put myself in, and I also had that harm turn out into hurting other people. I was not getting the resources or being seen in the way that I needed to be seen at that time. And so again, I say my work is deeply personal, and my personal is deep work. And so thank you all for allowing me to be here, and for really all of you being part of my healing journey too.
I'm Mary Lambert. I'm a queer singer songwriter, and poet. And I talk about trauma in my work because I think it's important. I think